All right. Hey, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about a paper called Getting Aligned on Representational Alignment. Um, Unfortunately, I feel a little ill, but that's okay because my presentation isn't that long. So I hope it will be fine. So this paper is on representational alignment. Before we can talk about it, let's talk about what representations are and what alignment is. I'll start with a bit of a story. About 10 years old, I had a strange idea that it is possible that I am seeing colors not the same way as other people do. Because it's like we are calling those colors the same names, but there is no way to really check if we are seeing those colors the same way. So later I found out that I'm a bit colorblind, so it's probably true. And also that about 200 years ago, John Locke published a paper on it. And it was one of the early papers on representations and representational alignment. So what it is? Broadly speaking, any information processing system, like a machine learning model or a human or an animal, can create representations in which it describes the world around. So basically, it's like a cloud of concepts in our head that we use to describe the world. Like we have a concept of roundness, concept of softness, concept of hardness, and these are just a few examples of many of concepts or representations. Representations are not universal across different systems and can vary quite a lot. For example, we can assume that human and machine learning model have quite different representations when solving the same task, or different animals can have different ideas of different phenomena, different natural things, or abstract things like sky. All right. So different systems of very different origin can form different representations or comparable representations. That's not that important. Like human language, like for example, human languages have semantic neighborhoods in their structure, and those neighborhoods are not necessarily the same across languages. Then biological systems like animals, humans have some comparable brain activity in response to solving the same task, and it can be interesting to compare them to find similarities and dissimilarities. Then finally, machine learning models are forming representations all the time, and we often use them to try to understand how they work. All right. So there are different problems which we can seek to solve with representational alignment. For example, we may want to just compare two different representations. We can try to find a common space between representations or a sort of mapping function between them, which will tell us what representation of one system corresponds to in another. Or we can try to increase representational alignment. It's kind of a teaching learning experience. All right, so finally that is over. What is this paper about? So in this paper, they propose a kind of unified universal framework to describe representational alignment problems. It is quite versatile, can be applied to problems from different domains, from cognitive science to neuroscience, machine learning. They also review a few recent papers that were working on representational alignment problems and put them inside this framework and show how it can work. And finally, they in general provide quite a good background on this problem and highlight the existing problems. So this is the framework they propose. It looks quite technical and fairly abstract, and probably it's not a good idea to spend too much time on it, but I think I'll say a few words. It looks so abstractly because, well, it is supposed to fit research in different domains, and in different domains, different problems arise. So, for example, if we were handling a machine learning problem, systems could be machine learning models, and the measurements could be just activations on different layers. And yeah, it looks like there is too much complexity in this. But for example, in cognitive science, the system can be a group of people, and measuring them may require some complicated techniques. So yeah, that's just required for a truly universal framework. But anyway, so they propose this framework, and they review a few problems of representational alignment from different domains which can fit in this framework. I'll talk about them more because they are much less technical. They are more interesting, I think. And I would divide them in two camps. Ones that show more interesting results or more amusing results, and others that shows something useful that I was glad I learned when I was preparing this presentation. So an example of measuring the representational alignment problem from the cognitive science was shown in this paper. And basically they took two groups of people and asked people from each group to iteratively reproduce a melody. And this melody consisted of 3 tones of different time lengths. And so they did it a few times with every group, and iteration after iteration refined the initially randomly sampled melodies into the kind of melodies most of the people tend to gravitate to when they reproduce them. And once I had this picture, the picture of this on the right, and the picture like this for the other group, they could compare them and find something interesting. In this case, one interesting thing is that people look to gravitate towards integer length tones, melodies. Like if one tone takes 1 unit of time, the other takes 2, and the other one is 1, but not 1.5, and something like that. And those integers are quite small. All right, next example of measuring comes from neuroscience. In this work, people were comparing the neural activation, neural responses in monkeys and humans when they were shown some images, some scenes, objects, inanimate objects, animate objects, and that kind of things. There's quite a story how they obtained the 2 pictures in the first place, because they were using fMRI with humans and some electrodes with monkeys. And then they had to compare them on the same kind of space. But in the end, this problem was to measure the alignment between these 2 results. This, I think, is one of the more useful papers. It comes from machine learning, and in this paper, people just reviewed a few techniques, a few methods for computing similarity measures between machine learning model activations. And I think they propose their own called CKA, which should be good for that. All right, that was all for measuring. As for bridging problems, bridging representations, one example comes from the neural, from machine learning. It basically, this problem basically naturally arises when you try to join two different models, for example, text language model and computer vision model to perform the same task. In this case, what you can do is you can take two pre-trained models and come up with some sort of communication model between them, which will transform representations, embeddings of one model to the representations of the other. Okay, and finally, for the increase in the alignment problems, this one example comes kind of from joint cognitive and machine learning research. So people had a huge data set on triplets of images and people's decision on them, which one of the images was odd. And so what they do, they trained a model on this data set to do the correct decisions. And also took the probability weights of those decisions, which we calculated from the data set from the human statistics, and nudged their model to also learn the human representation of the world. That's quite interesting. Next increasing problem comes from neuroscience. In this case, maybe you have heard before about works that train the models to decode the picture that a person is shown from the fMRI data. This work is kind of the reverse one. It is trying to model the fMRI responses to the shown images. And finally, an example of increasing alignment in machine learning is quite studied, I think. One of the prominent examples is knowledge distillation, and the problem of teaching student and teacher models. Yeah, an example for that is one work that proposed a sort of improved objective function that could be used for teacher-student model training. And okay, so these were all the examples they covered in details, but they also provide a huge background on these kind of problems coming from different fields. And they also present challenges, the open challenges that remain. But it's quite an interesting reading, but not that interesting presentation. So I'm leaving it to you. Maybe we can move to questions, or maybe you want to know more about something. All right. I think we can end then. Or maybe I just don't hear you. Let me check something. Can you say something?
Hello? Hello.
Oh yeah, okay, I can hear you. So, okay, let's just end then.
Thank you.
And stop the recording.